This week's this week's show brought to you by Draymond Green's triple doubles. You get a triple double. You get a triple double. You get a triple double. Welcome back to another Boxscore Geeks show. First show of the new year, and it's not that I come unprepared, dear listener. I just come with a bunch of frazzled thoughts that may not be as related to the NBA as you might like. Still, I think it'll be a fun show. We're going to talk the Warriors. Again, it's not our fault. It really isn't. Like, Brian, I mean, I'm doing this national level, but you're local. I mean, I got to imagine it's nuts in Golden State, in California, with how they're doing.
I've got my Warriors full squad t-shirt on tonight. Harrison Barnes is back from injury. They don't quite have a full squad, though. Zealy's still out and Steve Kerr, of course. But they're getting there. Curry's playing again, too. Beating teams up, Dre, every night.
That was the voice of our amazing producer, Brian Foster, who you can find on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. And I am your host, Dre Alvarez. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers. So as I mentioned, we're going to talk the Warriors because, of course, we're going to talk a fun game based on the Warriors I came up with called NBA Jam College Edition. Don't worry, we'll have lots of complicated rules to make this discussion long and convoluted. So I suspect some of you will love it and dig in the comments and Twitter, and some of you will say, what a waste of time, and I couldn't agree more. And then finally, we're going to talk some movies that I got around to seeing the last couple of weeks. As we mentioned on last week's show, I did see Concussion last week, and then I got to talk Star Wars. I do have some stuff to say about Star Wars. I'll warn you if there are any spoilers, though. All right, Brian, let's get into the Warriors. A few things here, just some fun news things. I do a weekly column called the BSG Top 10, where I look for, I don't want to say the best, because that would just be too easy, right? I could every week just say, find me the top 10 wins produced, or the top 10 points, or whatever. But I look for like 10 box scores I really like, and this is a lot of games I remember, or query logging. And an easy one last week, I actually had to contain myself. I gave Draymond Green 2 spots on the list. I think I could have given him 3, but I actually did hold it back. And then also, you just hovered over DeMarcus Cousins. I actually was debating giving DeMarcus Cousins 2 spot on the list. This game where DeMarcus Cousins didn't foul out, where George Karl got a tech, where Tyson Chandler got technicaled out. It was just so weird. It was just such a weird game, so I had to give that some love. But the player we got to talk about is Draymond Green, who I'm not 100% certain, because Basketball Reference, the query tool they have, goes back to 1985. Obviously, we can go back a little further, so I'm not 100%. But he is now in the top 30 in NBA history, at least for contemporary time. That's 1985 onward, in terms of triple-doubles. He has 9 career triple-doubles now, and that's following 3 consecutive triple-doubles. And what I should stress is amazing about like Draymond Green and the things we've discussed is the Warriors, even with these close games where he's getting it a lot, Draymond Green's normal minutes do not compare to history players in the past, like Magic Johnson, Jason Kidd, and Oscar Robertson obviously are the players that no one's going to touch, right? But, just in terms of minutes played, pace, all that jazz, he's just not close. But he is a triple-double machine right now. He is an assisting machine. I mean, he is making a strong push to being MVP. Obviously, he's not going to get it, but just like I said, I'm assuming I'm just going to run out of things to say about Draymond Green. I'll just probably start putting links in my weekly top 10 things and say, see last week. But 3 triple doubles in a row, an amazing guy, and a major point for me, which is Draymond Green was picked in the second round of the draft, and I got in a weird discussion on Twitter today where I pointed out that the Lakers and 76ers are falling over themselves to lose. Yes, both teams are tanking. And with the hopes of getting a top 3 pick, with the hopes of getting the Lakers' top 3 pick. And the best team in the league is doing it with a number 7 pick. And here's what I should point out about Steph Curry. Steph Curry, I believe, was the 5th guard picked in the draft and the 3rd point guard picked in the draft. So he was picked 7th. But he was the 5th guard and 3rd point guard. So it's like this team that is doing amazing is doing it with players that were not the marquee player, that weren't the number 1 pick or the 1st guard or whatever in the draft. So I found that amusing, and I tweeted out about that. And obviously I got some people tweeting back that, the Warriors did tank to get Harrison Barnes. They didn't want to lose that pick. And the Warriors do have Andrew Bogut, and he's a number 1 pick. And this got me down a tangent that we're going to talk on the show, Brian. I'd like to hear your thoughts, which is I get really, really annoyed in discussions about anti-tanking and the right way to build teams with people using the argument you need a top pick to win in the NBA and using, say, LeBron James as an example. LeBron James with the Miami Heat does not count as needing a top three draft pick, not player, draft pick to win because the Heat just went out and bought him on the open market when he became available on free agency. They gave him 16 million a year over 5 years, and four draft picks to the Cavaliers to get the rights to him. But they did not need a top three draft pick to get him. And even if you argue, Beasley's draft value had plummeted. So even if they had trade assets that were former picks, this is a common logical fallacy I see all the time. My wife falls for it. I was giving this example before, Brian, where my wife will go to Kohl's with the free gift cards they send you in the mail, and she'll come home and she'll say, I got this shirt. It only cost me $2 because I had the gift card, and then it was $12, but it used to be $50. And I always look at her and go, no, it's a $12 shirt. It's not a $50 shirt. It's a $12 shirt. Even if it was at one point in the past 50, it is now $12. So in the NBA, when people go, Andrew Bogut counts as the number one pick, no, he doesn't. Andrew Bogut counts as a traded for expiring Monte Ellis or re-signed for X million a year over this many years. I get incensed when people use that logic because it essentially allows them to double count. It allows you to count a player as both a draft pick, a free agency signing, a trade. You kind of get to put them in one category. So when we look at successful teams in the NBA, it's not to say drafting well or even having a top pick, right? The Heat succeeded really quickly with Dwayne Wade. Most teams that get top draft picks do not succeed immediately because it takes the players a few years to get there. But, LeBron James on year 5, I still count as a draft pick because they drafted him and they had his restricted free agency rights. LeBron James in year 8, when you sign him on the free market, does not count. LeBron James, if you traded for him, even if he was a draft pick, does not count. And even if you traded a draft pick for him, if that draft pick fell in value and the only reason you included, say, a number 2 pick for LeBron James was to make salary match, it doesn't count. So that's, sorry for the weird tangent there, Brian. It's just like when you're counting, when you are discussing tanking and the importance of it, you're not going to convince me the importance of tanking for the Warriors' success when tanking got them Harrison Barnes, and Harrison Barnes has been out half the season, and they still won, 30, what are they at, 33? What are they at right now, Brian?
Oh, right now in victories, I want to say 31, but it could be 32. They're playing again tonight against the Lakers later on. We'll see.
Oh, if that's
it's a lot of
victory,
wins. They had 30 before the new year. I know that.
So that's all I'm saying is it's like you can't be like they needed to tank to get Harrison Barnes to win when Harrison Barnes has been out half the season. And you can't count Steph Curry as needing a top draft pick when he's number 7. And even I'd argue he's even lower than you would argue because he was number 7 in the draft, but they clearly needed a guard and they were like, we are going to get the last pickings of guards in this draft, right? That we are out of guards. Everybody else has picked a guard.
And let's just say, for the sake of argument here, okay, LeBron James is considered a number 1 pick overall for the Heat's purposes. Even if you do think that, which we don't, they didn't get him by tanking. They got him by being a really good team and attracting him. Their other, Wade and Bosh are like, hey, come on, LeBron, let's do it. So tanking is not the answer, regardless of how you treat LeBron.
Yeah, I think my main issue, so for instance, the Lakers, I believe it was Hightower CBS was the person who tweeted at me and basically got mad because he was insinuating that I was saying that I thought the Lakers shouldn't try and keep their top 3 pick. And all I'm saying is tanking is not a victimless activity. It is something that requires you putting a season on hold, meaning that you're going to lose fans. And it is also going to impact, like you were mentioning, the ability of people to come along. Because, for instance, the Heat, when they got LeBron, the season before they made the playoffs, they were near 40 wins, right? Somewhere in there with Dwayne Wade. And, they had Dwayne Wade and then they were a team to contend, and that made it really easy to sell to Bosh and LeBron. Hey, you guys come here. We're going to go from being a team that makes the playoffs to being a title contender in one season. If people recall, Kevin Garnett, when he went to the Celtics, initially refused to go to the Celtics because he went, I don't think you can win, and I'm old. I need to win now. And they said, what if we get...
Ironically, he's still playing, Dre, but continue.
Well, to be fair, I think he wisely recognized, and he was right.
Yeah.
At that time, he was one of the best players in the NBA. No one's going to
Hmm.
dispute that. He went on to win Defensive Player of the Year.
One of
Was
the
the
best
best
of
player.
all time, right?
Well, absolutely. I'm saying obviously career-wise one of the best of all time, but I'm saying just on a any production standpoint, he was one of the top 5 players in the NBA in 2008. And he wisely recognized, he goes, if I want to win now and be a key part of it, it has to happen now because if not, I can't get $20 million a year and be a key contributor to a franchise team right now. You know, right now on the Wolves, he could be making 20 million a year. I mean, no one would pay that, but he could be making 20 million a year, but he wouldn't lie to himself and think that they have a chance of contending because he's going to get paid 20 million a year and play 20 minutes a game. So anyway, the point being, he didn't want to go to the Celtics because he didn't think they could win, and they got Ray Allen, and he goes, "Okay, I'll go." So to your point on a tanking team, if you tank, then you hurt yourselves in the ability to recruit because players go, "You've been tanking," and even if they believe there is a draft prospect, it has to be a really good draft prospect. It means unless you get Carl Anthony Towns, they're not going to look at you and go, "Oh, you got D'Angelo Russell. Oh, heck yeah, he's a star." They're going to go, "He might be good in a few years, but I don't have a few years to wait." If you've got a 32-year-old star like LeBron James will be in a season or two, do you think he's going to go to a team that just drafted a rookie that they think will be good in 3 seasons? No, he's going to ignore that. So tanking is not like a free pass. It costs you fans. It costs you recruiting. It may make other team. It may make trades hard because we kind of mentioned on a few shows ago, like Hassan Whiteside might be on the block, but if you're a team that's tanking, you don't want to tank for him because you don't get his bird rights. So it is not worth your time to trade for him right now. So if you're a team that decides we are going to lose to get a draft pick, you make a decision not to do other actions that can improve your team. And so, from my perspective, by the way, if the Lakers could have gotten 20 cost effective wins this season, that means getting a good free agent or making a good trade or something like that, right? I would say screw the draft pick. Take the 20 wins as long as it's not just 1 year, right? As long as it's like for instance, Jay Crowder. Let's say the Lakers right now got an offer to trade Nick Young for Jay Crowder. The Celtics get drunk. They drunk dial the Lakers. They sign something that's stupid, right? Go for it and then play him. Play Jay Crowder. Make him feel at home there. Get your fans excited about something. You lose a top 3 draft pick, but you put yourself in a position to contend. It's when it's people miss that. People miss the idea that inaction is a problem. It's really there's been all sorts of psychological studies. Maybe we'll write about this at some point, Brian, because we talk about how we love behavioral psychology and we haven't written about it in a while. People in psychological studies are much more happy with inaction than action. And there are all sorts of really messed up experiments they do where they ask questions such as, okay, there's 5 kids that are about to get hit by a bus or a train. You can hit a button. This button will stop them, will stop 4 of them from getting hit, but one of them will still get hit. Do you press the button? Most people say, like, yeah. Then they go, okay, 5 kids are about to get hit by a train. You can push one of the kids over. Like, you have to push the kid, and the other 4 will get saved. You'll be fine, but that kid dies. You push the kid over, and fewer people say yes. And they do all sorts of levels of asking, right? Like, you push a button that throws a kid in front of the train. The simple point, though, is people are much more comfortable with inaction than action, and they view inaction as harmless, whereas inaction is, this sounds like a weird way of phrasing it, inaction is actually an action. And in the case of taking, it can be a bad action if it's costing you the possibility to improve right now. Because in the NBA, my opinion, you always have to be in maintenance mode in the NBA. Look at the Spurs. The Spurs do not stand still. The Spurs are always targeting another player in Europe that can potentially be good. They're always targeting another free agent that some team discarded stupidly. They're always targeting a smart draft pick, right? I mean, look at the Spurs this season. They've got LaMarcus Aldridge, who's a marquee free agent signing. I'm really curious, random number who's mentioned him a few times in the comments. I'm really curious to see if LaMarcus Aldridge keeps up the star level play. I really hope he does. But they got a marquee free agent, LaMarcus Aldridge. They re-signed Kawhi, which was huge. They got Boban, who was a D-leaguer. They've got multiple moves going on to keep themselves getting better. And if any one of them fails, they've got multiple things in the fire. Whereas if you're the Lakers or 76ers, they're really just praying that there is a star in the upcoming draft to save the day. And I don't think that's a good strategy.
No, it's not a good strategy, and I liked how you use the word maintenance mode for the Spurs because there's this perception that you're either like tanking or you're just going for it. And the going for it to me means things like, I don't know, selling the farm for Joe Johnson, like what happened a few years ago, things like that.
That was amazing.
Yeah, and we talk about it a lot, right? Giving a lot, overpaying for marginal veterans, right? So yeah, what the Spurs do is the right way to do it. You get the value wherever you can. It's not an all or nothing proposition. But you know what the Lakers types are saying right now is, well, Ben Simmons is that kind of guy, that he's maybe one of the top first round rated picks in a long time. So if they did tank far enough to get Ben Simmons, maybe they could actually attract free agents just because of him, along with, of course, the LA media market and whatever benefits that has.
My favorite examples are actually the Celtics and the Lakers on your point there, because it's still one of my favorite posts I've written, and I mean it is basically just recapping a story from Jeff Pearlman and the Showtime Lakers. The Lakers went after Ralph Sampson hard and failed to get him. And when they failed to get him, they basically took the assets and stuff they would have used on Ralph Sampson and other stuff, and it kept them at dynasty level for like 3 more seasons. That was failing to get a surefire number one amazing pick.
You said James
Sampson.
Worthy was one of those picks, I think.
Well,
or
that's
assets?
yeah. So that's what happened, right? Is they were going, Ralph Sampson is this like a Ben Simmons guy, right? Like Ralph Sampson is this. He's gonna be the biggest star in the NBA for the next decade, was the thought at the time. And I think Jay Brett. I apologize. I believe Jay Brett. Jay Brett's one of my favorite commenters. It makes me sad. Some of our best commenters and fans of the Wages of Wins over the years have been big Laker homers. But anyway, Jay Brett jumped in and said that the Celtics had actually gone after Ralph Sampson a few years before. And Ralph Sampson played, I think, all 4 years in school. So it's like people were courting Ralph Sampson as far back as his rookie season, and he just ended up staying in school.
You mean freshman year in college?
Did I say
rookie season?
Rookie season of college. So
gotcha.
That's all I'm saying is that, Ralph Sampson was this big name that everybody knew was going to be huge. And obviously in the modern day, he was going to be a one and done player. But back in the day, he just chose to stay in school. Point being, he was this surefire thing and he didn't pan out. Same thing. The Celtics tanked to try and get Greg Oden or maybe Kevin Durant. Didn't pan out. And, even if you argue they were going after Durant, the Celtics ended up in a much better position than the Thunder, who ended up getting Durant, because they took all these assets that they'd been stockpiling. They took the picks that they would have hopefully used on Durant or Oden and turned them into all these other great players. Now, it required luck. I've got no complaints about that. But the point being, everybody thinks the line I think I used to you pre-show is everybody is so busy hoping for the next MJ, they're not busy looking for the next Dennis Rodman. It's my favorite teams in NBA history are these teams that were really hoping a top draft pick was going to save the day, and it failed. And the backup plan they did as a result ended up turning them to dynasty. The Heat count. Don't forget that the Heat were really hoping Beasley was going to be amazing. And then Beasley fell apart, and they're like, well, LeBron James is on the market, and he's good friends with Dwayne Wade. So there are plenty of examples of top draft picks that looked like can't miss, that missed, that
or got hurt, like Sampson and the other guy you mentioned.
Although it sounds mean.
Odin and Sampson both had injuries.
Odin and Sampson both got injured, but Sampson never convinced me, especially given he came in after a senior year of college. I don't think he was ever going to be a star in the NBA. I mean, he played all right. I mean, he did get injured after a couple seasons, but looking at his first couple years in the NBA, I'm not convinced. I'm not sold he was ever going to be the star people were hoping for.
Well, so the overall point on Ben Simmons, though, is even if he's the best can't miss guy, wins produced types, people would say that's a 60% chance at best he becomes a star, right? There's still a big area for him to bust. Look at
Anthony Davis. Like, Anthony Davis is a transcendent player, and he's turning into Grant Hill. He is. Yeah. There's like a 60% chance that Anthony Davis goes down with a minor injury every time he gets on the court. So even if we accept him as the greatest talent ever, he's not a can't miss. And that's the problem, is that if the Lakers are going, Ben Simmons is a can't miss, it's like, well, great. Let's say he is a can't. Let's say he is 100%. Your best bet at him is 25%. So are you really willing to sacrifice a season for 25%? And you can't sell me. Like, Lakers fans might try and sell me. You cannot sell me on that 100%. I would maybe put him at like 80 at the most, right? You put him at 80%, and even then those odds aren't great. So,
well, and the other example I would like to use is the Rockets, right? They kept putting pieces together, they finally were able to land Howard, and that's what they needed. I mean, maybe this season's a bad
And then
example, but last
ironically,
few seasons.
after they got Howard, they forgot how to get pieces. Like
Yeah.
that's Corey Brewer and Josh Smith, and that was what was really odd. Is it's like the not 76ers, the Rockets are either can't get a star and can get really good players, or can get stars and can't get really good depth. I don't. Maybe it's some curse or something. I don't know.
Don't tank.
All right. Well, there's an interesting question there, which is, I think it's fine if the Lakers were in a position where the season's over, and they might already be there, by the way. They might be in the place where it's like they can't win, right? The Lakers team is really bad. Even we argue Kobe is horrible, and even when Kobe sits, it's not as if the Lakers do well. They have a horrible team, right? They have like maybe one or two good players. But I don't think it's worth the Lakers like intentionally benching D'Angelo Russell in close games if it's going to cost him developing. So, but I do think it's fine if you're a bad team. The Warriors back in the day, they might have been in the right situation, right? Like they maybe have had a 5% chance of the playoffs and a better chance at Harrison Barnes. I don't know if it was the right move. I'll stress that. But I'm just saying, if you tank at the cost of doing proactive moves to your franchise. And the 76ers are a key example of this. The 76ers have not like spent a dime on a free agent in the last 5 seasons, like a real free agent. Like when they got Ish Smith and people were excited, I was like, are you Ish Smith? Like Ish Smith would be like the 5th guard on the freaking Spurs. And it would be only because of injury. He would only make it in during injury, or as what's the human cigar is the line for players that only come in when the game is a blowout. Ish Smith makes you excited. It's like, no, you have to, and there were clearly there, Robin Lopez was on the market there, Amir John, like look at the Celtics, Amir John, there were players on the market they could have gone after to make their team better that they clearly did not. And you can't sell me, because I know some of the people they talk to for analytics. There are smart analytics people that work with the 76ers that were like, you can target these players and they'll be good. And they didn't. They just refused to spend money. And if you're losing games at the cost of targeting free agents that will help you in the future, you're making a mistake.
Yeah, and so when we talked about tanking, I guess it was last year, there's a lot more discussion around it. And my problem with the whole conversation was I felt tanking was pretty ill-defined. Like, what did it actually mean to say a team is tanking? So here's how I was looking at it last year anyway, is the kind of tanking you're talking about that's really bad is basically roster tanking. You don't want to prevent yourself from bringing in good players. You should always bring in good players whenever you can, right? But then maybe the more acceptable tanking is lineup tanking within the season. So if you're in a situation where you're the Warriors a few years ago, all their guys are hurt except for Brandon Rush, who had a ridiculous season that year for whatever reason. Why try to rush these injured guys back when your team's not going anywhere? Leave them out of the lineup for a while, right? But at the same time, you shouldn't be just slashing your roster and shipping all these guys out that are good players. So I think that's kind of the difference.
I think, like I said, my definition of tanking is intentionally losing games. That's the bare bones. And then the bad type of tanking I'm against is when you are intentionally losing the games in a manner that is hindering progression of your franchise. And I would, like I said, I would include not giving minutes to young players, because I think it would be worth the Lakers' time to get D'Angelo Russell some good reps with a good mentor. We discussed this a little, like the 76ers. I with the 76ers, where I don't think any players can develop well there. I think we have all these draft busts, right? Like Sam Bowie always shows up number 1 on the draft bust list, which is I don't.
Another guy got hurt, by the way.
Yeah, I mean he played better than we would have expected, and he got injured after Michael Jordan. I don't consider Sam Bowie a draft bust in the slightest. But what I was going to say is we put so much on the player that came out with big promise and not enough on the team. That's that. I'm already forgetting his name. I apologize, but that quarterback that wrote that great article on how he didn't view himself as a failure.
Yeah, Joey Harrington from the Oregon Ducks.
So Joey Harrington for the Oregon Ducks, who went to the Lions, like from a football perspective, have to be one of the worst places to go. And I get really annoyed when we put the bust on the player and not enough on a team, because I think there is a ton. I really question the number of players that have flourished on the Spurs that would not have been wasted elsewhere. Or like, let's take Tim Duncan as an example. Tim Duncan was obviously going to be great no matter where he went. If he had gone to the Celtics might have gotten another title sooner. If he'd gone to the Nuggets, they would have kept him for 5 seasons. They would have had a playoff upset. And then they would have let him go to the Hawks for nothing. Damn you, Nuggets. That's a Dikembe Mutombo reference, by the way. But the point being, when he hit 30, yes, finger wag. So for those of you just listening on the live show, Brian Foster just gave me a finger wag. All right. So, but the point being, after 30, it's entirely possible Tim Duncan doesn't get rested and doesn't have this amazing 20-year season where, everybody calling Kobe the greatest of all time. You just have to look at the Spurs and go, Tim Duncan's right there, dudes. Like, you're trying to act like Kobe Bryant is the greatest of all time.
He's older than Kobe, right? And still playing better now.
He's older than Kobe, although I don't think, he went to college, so I don't think he has as many miles in terms of the
fair
NBA.
enough.
But no, I mean, Tim Duncan has had, I would argue behind John Stockton, maybe Jason Kidd, the greatest and maybe Kareem. He's a top 5 longevity player in the NBA. And I think on another team that doesn't happen. I think on another team at 30, they're still playing him 38 minutes a game, and his wheels start falling off. So the team you go to matters a lot in terms of your progression and your career, and I don't think we give enough credit to the team. Credit or blame to the team. When we call a player a draft bust, it's like maybe Michael Beasley going to the Heat when they were still in quote-unquote rebuilding mode wasn't the best place for him, and maybe if he'd gone to Minnesota, a quiet town, Miami, I've been there. That is a crazy place in terms of partying and weather and everything. Maybe if he goes to a cold place, he'd be a little better, though he did get traded to Minnesota and sucked, so maybe Beasley was just hopeless for them.
I love these outside the game theories. That's always been Arturo's theory on the Rockets. He thinks they suck because they party too much, but it's like, who knows? Is he at those parties, I'm wondering? Let us know, Arturo, where the good parties are.
But no, I mean, I think, there's a lot of stuff to team construction, and it's funny because we're tech guys, and we there is so much of an impetus on, big snack rooms, and then of course being proud of yourself for having better snack rooms that are healthy. Like, this always amused me at Google. Google would be like, we give our employees free snacks to keep their morale high, and then like, we gave them healthy snacks because the free snacks weren't healthy. I'm like, you're solving a problem you created. But there's this big impetus on making this workplace just an amazing place to work because it helps your people develop, and then saying we're going to develop the people. And Chris Ye released a great book called The Alliance, which is all about trying to make a good environment for future growth and all this jazz. The tech world, we accept this as a big part of your decision to work at a company is how it's going to develop you or how they're going to treat you. And in the NBA, we just say, you go where we tell you, and that might be a horribly run franchise. And then if you fail, we're going to blame you for the failure. And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah, especially young rookies get blamed when their teams keep being bad. I mean, well, these are terrible teams to begin with in general, right? It's not very often you can have Tim Duncan go to the Spurs, after David Robinson was hurt. So, yeah, it's tough times for the rookies.
It's funny. Like, a funny point is if you look at kind of mentality, hockey is fascinating to me because in hockey, if you're the goalie and you're having a bad game, it is acceptable convention to pull you. And at least the way I interpret it, I used to be a much bigger hockey fan when the Avalanche were good, but the way I interpret it is they're basically like, look, you're just having a bad game. It's the same with pitchers in baseball, right? You get pulled if you get lit up, but they still start the next game. They just say, hey, look, you're having a bad game. Just take the night off, right? It's a bad game. We're done. And in basketball, there are blowouts, but essentially, if you're within 15 points but are having a horrible game, they leave you in the game. And there is he's Manu Ginobili point that we always bring up, that a coach goes, this is a good player, and I'm going to trust him to regress the mean. But in basketball, there is less logic put on, hey, you're having a bad night, maybe just take the night off. There's a ton of responsibility. You just have to keep playing. You have to keep playing through it. And I wonder about that. And we've talked psychologically about players before, about the stand-up comedian mentality they have to have, the always believing you're doing good even when you're doing bad. And that's why players like Kobe and Nick Young can go 6 for 20 and not see a problem with that.
Nick Young's got some funny jokes too, like a stand-up comedian, so I'll give him credit for that.
Nice. But, they have to go these like 6 for, they have to have this mentality that the next shot's going to go in or they would have stopped playing long ago. Getting to the NBA requires being a top player at every level and basically being a winner until you go to the NBA, and then you start losing. And I don't know the mental effect that has on you, right? If you come from being a team that made it to the Final Four, which means you're one of the top 1,000 teams in the what's the word I want to look for? You're one of the top 32, but I'm saying out of thousands of teams in the nation, you're at the very, very top. And you go to the NBA and you're bottom half. What does that do to your mentality? So we got way off track,
Oh
Brian.
yeah,
In the show notes, I'm just going to be like Dre rants about stuff for a while. That'll be the note. But anyway, one other note on Draymond Green because this came up when I was looking him up. Draymond Green, I always mess this up, so let me get this right. It's Michigan State, right?
correct.
I recall like when Paul Shirley was on the show, I confused like Iowa State. I hate
Oh, his
colleges.
rival school. Oh, bad times, Dre.
I hate colleges with Iowa State. And by the way, I'm a Colorado State University alum, and there's Colorado University and whatever. And there's Colorado University of Denver and Colorado University of Boulder, so all over the place. But regardless, Draymond Green graduated or didn't graduate, but went to Michigan State.
He
You know
was
who
a
else?
four-year player. I think he did graduate, but
Did
we'll
he
have to
did
see
he
on that.
graduate?
Yeah,
All
he was.
right.
Well, that's why he went in the second round, right? He had no hype at all going into the draft.
So anyway, Draymond Green, Michigan State. You know another key Michigan State alum?
Magic Johnson,
Magic Johnson, who did
good
who
player.
did graduate early. Okay, so or didn't graduate early, but left early. But regardless, this got me thinking NBA Jam because Draymond Green, as I mentioned, is already now top 30 in double doubles. Or triple doubles. Another player that's top on the list in triple doubles, at least in the modern NBA, Magic Johnson. So I actually called on Twitter. I called Draymond Green maybe the modern era Magic Johnson. Maybe.
He leads his team in passing and he guards centers, so not very many guys that can do that.
There you go. Someone said they threw up in their mouth reading that, but whatever. So anyway, the point. Oh, and by the way, it's worth noting that Draymond Green did average a double double as a senior in college, but only 3.8 assists.
Much better trash talker than Magic Johnson too.
Well, I think Magic Johnson. What was brilliant about him, and he's got the smile. I think Magic Johnson was probably a really good, like, passive aggressive trash talker, like a Midwestern trash talker.
Maybe.
Where I'm from the Midwest. I'm not from. I live in the Midwest now, and that is how it goes. Where people will say stuff to you where it's an insult, but they say it with a smile on their face and nicely.
I've heard if you put "bless their heart" at the end of it, that's how you know it's a troll.
Oh yeah, and I was listening to a podcast with Mick Foley. I'm actually wearing a Mick Foley shirt today, and he was saying like in the South you say "bless their heart" before you're going to insult someone.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You'd be like "bless their heart," but Brian Foster's analysis of the Warriors is just quite bad. I would do that first, and then
Bless
if
your
you're
heart
from
for
the
that,
north,
Trey.
and then apparently if you're from the North, you say "with all due respect." So those are the two. Those are, and
That's funny.
it's funny listening to stand-up comedians, wrestlers, any performer that travels because they get the regional stuff where they, you get used to saying a certain thing a certain way, and then you hear, oh, over there they say things different. And anyway, regardless, NBA Jam. Of course, you're going to think about NBA Jam when we think two teams. Now, here are the rules I came up with, and I'm going to disagree with some of the pre-talk that we had on pre-show, Brian. So basically,
good.
all I was looking for is just great NBA combos of players that came out of the same school. Not that would necessarily win the game for you in the NBA Jam game itself.
Right, because my point was I thought that players, how good they were in real life, did not translate to NBA Jam at all just because of the game mechanics. But we're talking about real life 2-on-2 duos here.
Talking real life. And so the rules I had is a player that's in the NBA right now, a paired player from their alma mater, and what are some fun two-team combos you could come up with based on those set of rules, looking at, of course, through the lens of wins produced, productive players, etc. Because obviously, I don't think any team can touch Draymond Green, Magic Johnson, at least right now.
Wow.
I mean, obviously, a point that we can make is that Draymond Green, it's very early in his career in terms of longevity. Someone pointed that out when I called Steph Curry the modern era Michael Jordan, Draymond Green the modern era Magic Johnson, and they're on a team together. That's so amazing. Obviously, that's based on like 2 seasons. And the key part about Michael Jordan and Magic Johnson, they had a decade of amazing play. But regardless, my question just being, if they are like that, they're on a team together, and if you got Magic Johnson and Draymond Green together, that's just kind of, absurd. So what are some other fun ones? And so I wanted to kind of bounce this back and forth. Another fun one is obviously Russell Westbrook, UCLA, with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, that's pretty amazing too.
That's a good one. No offense to Russell Westbrook, who's been great this season, but again, the longevity thing, there's got to be some other guys from those Wooden days, we can look at.
So
We
what do you
need to
got?
get a list. Like, we need to pull up a list on the fly here of NBA
So by
players
the
from each
way,
college.
here's the fun note. We always kind of try and make this a class where you can learn sites to go to and stuff. And let me see if I can and copy this over to you, Brian. This is hard, listeners. So Brian and I are on Skype talking to each other, but then it's hard for Brian to look at notes on Skype because he's recording stuff and being a producer. But I'll try and copy a link to you on the script real quick, Brian. But Basketball Reference, the amazing site that it is, actually has a filter that lets you check all NBA players that went to school at a certain college. So, for instance, I just put University of North Carolina on there because that, of course, has Michael Jordan. And so I guess this kind of counts because he is in the NBA right now. But Vince Carter, Michael Jordan, that would be a fun, I don't think that would be the best two-man duo, but that would certainly be fun. Ray Felton, Michael Jordan, Marvin Williams, Michael Jordan, our old favorites, Ty Lawson, Michael Jordan, maybe Brandon Wright, Michael Jordan. I mean, obviously Michael Jordan's kind of a cheat code here, but I do think Vince Carter, Michael Jordan's another fun two-person combo from a specific school with the rules of an active player in the NBA right now and another player from their alma mater.
Those are pretty good. God, I need to bring. I mean, North
So
Carolina, though, a lot of
now,
good players.
now you can go over it. So if you go there, now you can just filter by school. And what I've been doing as a cheat code is if you go to Basketball Reference and look up a player, so this is a sad one. If you look up Steph Curry, and my dogs are very excited about
Not
this
a lot
part.
of other Davidson guys.
Exactly. If you look up Steph Curry at the very top, it does say he attended Davidson College. So if you click on Davidson College, you'll see all 6 NBA players that went to Davidson College. And unfortunately, Steph Curry, he's got a ways to go before he ties Dick Snyder in terms of 25,000 minutes played in the NBA. But I think that team is Steph Curry and not much else.
Fred Hetzel, too. Yeah, I've got this list up on stream now. Good stuff. Dick Snyder had a lot of points scored.
Another fun player in terms of that is Kawhi. Kawhi, I think, is the only player from San Diego, right? He stands alone. Not
Oh,
many other
Marshall
players.
Falk, though, from the football side.
You're making this more complicated, Brian. This is already as convoluted and complicated as possible. We're not doing like Bo Jackson cross sport stuff too.
Oh, that would be
But
even better.
listener, if you have any other fun ones, listener, if you have any other fun ones, I was debating making this an article. I might definitely look into it. But a ton of a lot of fun. I think.
Michael Cage was from San Diego State. He's number 1 on Basketball Reference's list. Great player from the 80s and 90s, Michael Cage.
So you're thinking Michael Cage goes along with Kawhi. Where do you rank them? Like, do you think they can take my Magic, Draymond team together?
See, this is where we need Patrick or someone with coaching experience to say, what's the 2-on-2 metagame all about? I personally couldn't say, but Michael Cage, 1,000 assists, 1,000 steals, 725 blocks. A lot of rebounds, too. Pretty good player. But, okay, let's bring up North Carolina as the final one here. We're running out of time. I was curious about them. Let's see. There's a lot of schools in North Carolina.
Do you want one of the super fun and kind of cheat code ones that has 2 active NBA players? With Wake Forest, you get Tim Duncan and Chris Paul.
Yeah. Rodney Rogers as well. Don't forget about him.
I have forgotten about him. I know nothing about this player. I mean, basically, I'm looking at it on NBA. It was 1994 to 2005. I mean, I basically got back into basketball with Carmelo Anthony in the early 2000s, so that would be right at the tail end of that. So, unsurprisingly, I don't know much about him.
Ed Davis also went to North Carolina. We've got the list of now. Larry Brown, not a bad playing career himself.
And coach, you got maybe smart strategy there.
Brad Doherty, another one. And I want to say, in terms of commentators, didn't we have? Let's see. Well, anyway, we're kind of losing momentum.
Oh, we got
here,
EJ Fisher in the EJ. I did not know.
Yeah.
So EJ Fisher is in this, and he is really happy. He was yelling like mad for Tim Duncan, Chris Paul. So
Oh, good.
There we go.
I saw earlier that he was saying that actually Rodman had the opposite effect, that the culture of the Spurs couldn't handle him, so they had to ship him out. So good opposite point there for him earlier in the show.
Well, a point, by the way, on Rodman. They still won a lot of games. So, I mean,
Hell yeah, they
Michael
did.
Jordan was a problem on the Bulls. Rodman was a problem on the Spurs. I think it's short-term versus long-term when you're doing that, where if you've got players that don't get along, you basically accept, like Kobe and Shaq is a good example. They were able to win 3 titles together. It was just a question of, it was a ticking time bomb. So there you go.
All
All
right,
right, so
Dre. What about Ryan Anderson and Jason Kidd? That's a pretty good one. How are you going to top
that makes
that?
me so sad because I like Ryan Anderson, but he's not never been great. Whereas like Jason Kidd is freaking amazing. So I don't know if I can put that up there. I mean, I do think Draymond. I want to see the finals between Draymond and Magic versus Tim Duncan, Chris Paul. I think that's amazing.
We need some more submissions here because I bet there's some really good ones. I mean, even University of Houston, Phi Slamma Jamma, all those guys were there at the same time. That was ridiculous.
Oh, holy cow! But okay, but the rule is, are there any people from University of Houston in the NBA right now? Because of course that was
Oh, I
what
see.
Clyde Drexler and Hakeem together, right? That's ridiculous.
Oh, so it has
But
to be one current player and one legendary player is
well,
the
it's
rules.
you have to have at least one. So because obviously
I
Tim
see.
Duncan and Chris Paul. So see, listener, this is okay.
This
We
is pretty
got
fun.
so Subsoul is saying Kareem and Westbrook would win. I can't. So here's the thing: if Westbrook actually defers to Kareem, I mean, just imagine the number of alley oops that those two get together. So
All right, let's bring up UCLA, the other UC here. And, shout out to Bill Walton, of course. You've got to include him in any of this.
oh,
Trevor Ariza, he's pretty good. I know he
yeah,
won't.
he's not making the
No Aaron Aflalo either, Dre.
Aaron Aflalo, who I did enjoy the fact that he is I don't know if this is still the case, but currently for this year is the has the best scoring performance of the year so far. So there you go. All right. So anyway, let's go on to movies, which is just so we're going to be off the NBA. I got two things to talk. Concussion kind of relates. I did see Concussion last week, and sorry if that's too quick of a transition, Brian. Apologies. I could already see we were going down the rabbit hole. So thank you. By the way, it was Subsoul and Glorious Hubris were actually in the Twitch comments and were having things. No, Greg Monroe, Allen Iverson. No, Ziano51 just said that is the last submission. No, outlawed because of Allen Iverson. Would be entertaining to watch though. All right.
Oh, I've got one for. I'll take Morning and Matumbo for Georgetown, who are also both there at the same time. That was a great combination.
But not active.
Okay,
But
fair
that's
enough.
Okay, well, this clearly there is enough content here that if I get off my butt and write the article, there is at least one, possibly more articles in this. All right. So anyway, let's talk a little Concussion, not get detracted on fun, arbitrary games that I do enjoy. I do enjoy these. These are some of my favorites. I basically stand by what I said on Dave Duerson last week. It was completely unjustified. At one point in the movie, he tells Bennett Omalu. So for those of you that don't know, just to recap you really quick, Concussion's a movie about Bennett Omalu, one of the leading neurologists who started finding basically the brain damage problem in the NFL. CTE is what it's called, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. He was one of the first guys behind it and came up against the NFL, who did a bunch against him but tried to bury him. I mean, it's not the same ballpark at all, but it does strike home a lot from being from the Wages of Wins background, where when Dave Barry first published The Wages of Wins, a guy named Dan Rosenbaum went out of his way on the internet to just really go after him and hammer him. And it's not even the same scope, doesn't really matter. But it just, obviously pings a little when you see that and you go mainstream really going out of their way to attack a scientist who's just kind of doing things the right way. But I saw the movie, and one of the issues that has come up is that Dave Duerson was made to look really bad. Dave Duerson, former NFL player that was on the benefits committee around the time when a lot of the CTE stuff was going on, and apparently fought against giving benefits to a lot of former players who claimed they had brain damage. His family and him, if he were still alive, he obviously felt a CTE as well. I believe he killed himself. Would say that he was doing this because he was handcuffed by the league. The league said you lead the benefits committee, but here are the rules that you are allowed to use, and he was going by those. In the movie, though, he yells at Bennett Omalu and tells him to go back to Africa. He acts out of character. I can see, I'm not justifying, I can see what the film writers were trying to do. They wanted to show an arc of a few players being on top of the world and then falling to CTE and just the gap. Because Dave Duerson in the movie at one point, one of the league people says to him, "You're going to become mayor one day." And so they're making this implication that Dave Duerson is this very successful player that's a savvy businessman after retirement that's got political ambitions and everything's looking up. And then he falls, tragically to brain damage. The issue being to do that, to try and make that arc fit in a manner that fits the 2.5 hour structure. They made him look more horrible than he was in real life because they wanted, for the movie, they want this big transition. They want to be, he's here and he goes here. He's the villain and he goes sympathetic, tragic death. But the cost being, as we discussed last week, Brian, they did this basically slandering a real person that did die, that still has family, that still has people going, and I'm not okay with that.
Yeah, in the article we linked last week, I think there's a quote from his son saying something like, not only did he not want to do all those things, and didn't do them, but he had legal, like, fiduciary responsibilities. So go after a guy for being, a fiduciary. That's kind of messed up.
Well, it would have been boring, right? I mean, I could see this in the movie if in the movie, because the way it works is movies have to be really quick. I'm going to go on a quick tangent here. One of my favorite movies is Hackers. It's not a good movie, by the way, people. It's a horrible movie, but it's still one of my favorites. And I've written a few times about it. I'm going to put the links. I'm promising this to future me. Future Dre, make sure you put the links of all the analysis I've done of Hackers. There are a few scenes that don't make any sense where a character talks to another character that's a main character that logically in the scene doesn't make any sense. And a common trope in movies, for instance, too, is hanging up. I would call you on the phone and say, Brian, I just got news on Draymond Green. Get down to the garden quick and hang up.
Not like, what time, where are we going to meet?
Yeah. The Cracked podcast just had a great video on this about things movies don't understand about real life. Yeah, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to call me back or text me and go, what time, when, what entrance, right? Like, you're allowed to just do that in movies. I can say, meet me at the arena.
But if you put a close-up on the phone, and people don't even hang up phones anymore, of course, they loudly press their cell phones. I mean... Yeah, exactly. It's not very dramatic.
So in movies, you're trying to stuff a story into 2 hours, which means you're going to cut a lot of stuff. A great movie is Chef with Jon Favreau, where in the director's commentary, there's this long scene he has in the movie. Chef's very meta because it's about him as a filmmaker and how he had to make all of these sacrifices to be a mainstream filmmaker and how he kind of lost his passion for it. And then by going and being an indie filmmaker, he got his passion back. But the metaphor he uses in the movie is being a chef. So chef at a mainstream restaurant versus an indie chef in a food truck. Anyway, but in the director's commentary, there's this scene of him like cooking a sandwich. And he says in the mainstream media that there would be a 1 second shot of the sandwich, just the sandwich coming out on the table. That'd be it. That's the entire shot. Whereas in the movie, he gave it like 30 seconds to show him cooking it and stuff. And so mainstream movies do this. And so they're trying to, and to get this back to Hackers, there are all these scenes that don't make any sense with main characters talk to each other. And the reason being that they don't have time to introduce new characters or new dialogue. My wife just turned off the car alarm, so apologies for that. Hopefully she turns it off soon. Anyway, so in Concussion, they basically have to do the same thing. They're going, we have to have quick dialogue that advances the plot. We don't have time for a new character. We don't have time for a drawn-out conversation. If Dave Duerson comes up and says, I got your benefits package, and according to the rules, I'm only allowed to do this much, and all of the things says that brain damage is not under the covered list. If you're looking like as a healthcare plan, right, they'd be like, these drugs are covered under tier 1, these drugs are covered under tier 2, the stuff you're arguing for is tier 3, so it's not covered. You can already, like, if you're listening to this podcast, that's a boring discussion and it's time consuming. So in the movie, it's much easier if he just comes up to the guy and says, take a Tylenol, file an appeal, and storms off. Even if that makes the real world him look much less sympathetic and terrible. Or if when he meets Bennett Omalu, instead of saying, man, what's your problem? Why are you publishing all this stuff? Haven't you seen the articles that the NFL has released that says there's not brain damage? Look at me. I'm fine. Like, I'm doing great after things. I play too. These people just need to take responsibility. You can already hear that scene takes time. So they have to cut it. But the problem is when you cut it while making a real person look horrible, we're against it. So it's a lot of rehashing what we said last week, but I just wanted to verify because on last week's show I talked a lot about it, and I wanted to at least come back and say, yeah, my suspicions based on the spoilers and stuff I'd read were right. And after watching the movie, it's the same thing. I did enjoy the movie, and it also reaffirmed like a lot of what we were saying, Brian, where I was talking about Bennett Omalu hoping for fame and stuff. They do a good job in the movie of saying he wasn't like, he was naive to the importance of football when he got introduced to it, but he very quickly realized the large impact of it, at least in the movie, how they portray it there. So if that's going to be the mainstream there, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, and again, to follow up what we said last week, what they needed to do then is just make up a new character like they did in Moneyball, right, for Paul DePodesta. DePodesta said, this guy's too much different for me. I don't want to put my name on it. Yeah, they should have made up a fake Dave Duerson to be the bad guy.
All right, and by the way, I apologize, listeners. We haven't actually done a ton of we've been doing this on Twitch for a while, and there's actually been a lot of discussion in the Twitch board, so I'm actually going to have to make sure to watch this. So I hope I'm saying it right. I think it's Yano51. You do win Troll of the Day for both the Allen Iverson comment and making fun of your fiance for liking hackers, and Andrew Sutton, the high school team. Got to give a shout out to that. Sorry to get dragged back into this, Brian, just when I thought I was out. So on the all college team, or the college
Nice
NBA
movie
jam,
reference, Trey.
but Andrew Sutton brings up LeBron James and Moses Malone or Dwight Howard. 100% agree. All right. A few people asked for this, and I got to bring it up. There was a segment that we took from the Short Corner podcast called Fuck That Guy, which is just where you come up with a person you saw over the course of the week and say, fuck that guy. It can be for a good reason, a bad reason. And this lets me streamline in something. This lets me streamline in something from Star Wars, because I wanted to talk Star Wars on the show. I didn't have a good reason for it. I do, though. I want to say fuck that guy to George Lucas. So there are two major things in the last week that have happened. So essentially, George Lucas gave an interview about how Disney is handling Star Wars. And I have two major problems with it. He recognized the problem very quickly, where he said, Star Wars is like my children and I sold them to white slavers. And then he kind of cut him. He realized immediately how bad that comment was. I totally feel for him, because on the podcast we've totally had moments where I'm like, I'm going to say something that I think is bad and I'm going to keep going, but maybe I shouldn't. But he totally recognized it, just laughed and stopped. But he basically made the Star Wars is my children, white slavers comment that has gone viral on the web. And the first point on that is you're not really allowed, I can give him having seller's remorse, but even if we're going back to the very, very beginnings of Star Wars, he's not allowed to claim that they're like some precious child. He was a sellout from the beginning, and I have no problem with that. George Lucas went into Star Wars going, I want to make a lot of money. Because one of the things he did on Star Wars, the very first one, Episode 4, is he took a pay cut to get the merchandising rights and to get the rights to any sequels. He basically was thinking to himself, I think there is a lot of money in merchandising and in future movies. And clearly he was right. So he didn't go in pure from the get-go. And then, of course, he ended up selling them for $4 billion. So I found that comment very disingenuous and very annoying. And it did, I hate to be mean on this, calling it like sour grapes, because he basically said, it sounded like Disney didn't really want any of his impact. Can you blame them after the prequels? I compared the prequels to Kobe Bryant, because if you look on Rotten Tomatoes, Phantom Menace has a Metacritic score of 60%. That's BS. It is not near 60%. That is totally overhyping it because of your remembering previous thing. The same way I think Kobe gets overhyped because he reminds people of MJ. Kobe is not a 60% movie on Rotten Tomatoes. But anyway, some sour grapes there. But additionally, he goes out of his way to kind of knock the new Star Wars movies by not being creative. And this is one of the biggest things I'm seeing. So some minor spoiler warning, I'm not going to go into any major depth, but basically Star Wars The Force Awakens is, I would call it, a remake of Star Wars Episode 4. I don't think anybody would complain about it. And I've got no problem with this. Star Wars Episode 4 came out in 1978. I don't mind remaking a movie after 40 years, especially if it was really popular here. And by the way, I'm going to give a shout out. EJ Fisher, who's one of my favorite commenters and one of my favorite people to talk to. I'm going to have to get you on a podcast in the near future to discuss this more. You're one of my favorite people to talk to. And all I was going to say is, if I just started responding to EJ's comments, this podcast would go like twice as long as it's already going. So I'm going to put those on the back burner. But EJ, expect an email from me. And if you ever want to talk on a podcast in the near future, let me know. All right. But so anyway, Star Wars, having a remake of Star Wars, I don't have a complaint. The original Star Wars was not original. It was, the Joseph Campbell, the hero's journey. It was that exact story. And then George Lucas wanted to do a Flash Gordon movie and he couldn't get the rights. There's a great Cracked podcast with Jason Pargin. Again, I'm just going to reiterate Cracked, that's my new shtick, I guess. But Jason Pargin talks about how the original Star Wars was him just rewriting Flash Gordon and changing enough stuff until it was original, but it wasn't in the least bit original. So I'd agree the new Star Wars poaches a lot more from Star Wars Episode 4 than George Lucas did, but George Lucas wasn't original. George Lucas wasn't going in pure of heart, hoping for some artistic creativity. George Lucas, his entire career has been about smart merchandising, smart franchising, trying to make money on future stuff, and ripping off ideas he likes. And by the way, as an author, that's fine. I mean, as a sports writer, so little of what I write is creative, because if there's a story, if Draymond Green's triple doubles are interesting to me, then it means they're interesting to at least 5 other people. The number of times I have found an angle on a sports story that no one else is thinking about at the same time, at least tweeting about, is 0. So I don't have any complaints about George Lucas stealing ideas from other movies he likes. That's called being a creator, and then you change enough of it to be original. But he wasn't that original. Like Star Wars is so childish. The Force is called the Force. Light swords are called. The reason light swords aren't called light swords is because that name was taken on, I forget, like Battlestar Galactica or some show at the time. He called them lightsabers because light sword was taken, and he just took the word sword and replaced it with saber. He went to a thesaurus and said, "What's another word I can use for sword?" So George Lucas wasn't that creative. So I was really, I completely feel for George Lucas feeling maybe seller's remorse, especially since it looks like Star Wars is definitely worth more than the $4 billion he sold it for. The first movie's already closing in on cracking down on Avatar. And here's a bit of advice to Disney: how about you actually make toys with your main character? Like, that's been a big thing going around. One of the funny memes on Twitter right now is men's rights activists claiming they cost Star Wars The Force Awakens $4 million in lost ticket sales. But anyway, I would argue that Disney is hurting themselves more by not making good Rey action figures. Like, just do it. I went to Walmart last night. I was debating doing it. I didn't want to get thrown out, but I was debating taking my phone and taking a picture of every Rey action figure versus all the others. And so, like, Disney has these fun little, basically they're amiibos.
Oh, call the men's rights activists. They would hate that.
All right, whatever. But anyway, so there amiibos are like these little toys Nintendo makes, and there are a bunch of other variants of this that are kind of like these little action figures that can plug into your video game system. And there were a bunch of Star Wars ones, and they had Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader and Ben Kenobi and Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren has one. Kylo Ren has one of the most annoying and confusing names. So here's a minor spoiler. Apologies. So if you haven't seen it,
it's January, so that's the rule. You can spoil stuff in January.
I'm just gonna say, like, we're gonna finish up after this point. Okay, so Kylo Ren is one of the characters. The main character is named Rey. So there's Rey and Ren already, and then Kylo Ren. Spoilers, the big spoiler. His real name is Ben, because if you're a Sith or whatever, you have your Sith name, and then if you're a real person before you have your real name. So you have Rey, Ren, Ben in terms of your main character and main protagonist. That is so damned confusing to try and talk about. And then additionally, Kylo Ren, this was on the great That Thing You Like podcast. They talked it. There's a band called Rilo Kiley. So I'm never going to get Kylo Ren right on the first try because of all that.
Is it Riley Kilo? I don't know. We'll have to look that up.
It's right. Okay, we're getting off track. So anyway, apologies for
Twitch
that.
chat, help us out.
But yeah, there was a Kylo Ren action figure, but there weren't any Reys. And I'm seeing all of the justifications I'm seeing from manufacturers, and maybe we can blame J.J. Abrams and just call him a freaking moron for this, not for everything else he did. Obviously the right move was copy Star Wars beat by beat, release it, make sure you have the old characters and Chewbacca in it, and it'll make $1 billion. George Lucas went for original. Apparently you can just cash in on nostalgia. I have no complaints about that. But all of these toy people were like, we didn't want spoilers. We didn't want to make Rey action figures because we thought it would spoil the plot. So if J.J. Abrams told the toy division, don't release Rey action figures, I think it's going to spoil my movie. That was just a stupid move on his part. One of the stories going around here is the Star Wars Monopoly. It doesn't have a Rey little piece in it. It has a Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader one. And a little kid complained about it, and they were like, we didn't want to release a Rey action figure in Monopoly because we thought it would spoil the movie. She was in the trailer. Like, I don't know. Sorry. So we've gotten way
I didn't know who she was until I saw it, but then again, I'm old.
All right. So I got way off tangent there, but anyway, so George Lucas, I feel for you as a creator. I feel the pain of seeing someone else take your work, and I won't want to say do it better, although the new one was way better than the prequels, even if there's tons of good analysis. Anita Sarkeesian had a good one on it. I've really liked Max Landis's take on Rey being a Mary Sue. She totally is. It's just not unique. That has become a very common problem in modern cinemas. Our heroes are always perfect, and that gets very frustrating. We don't have flawed heroes that make mistakes or get into trouble that they can't get out of. We have a lot of heroes that are just like, I'm going to point my gun and shoot everything.
Well, maybe just the movies, though. What about TV, though? There's so many anti-heroes in TV right now.
Well, absolutely. I mean, movies and TV in general have the, like, guy or girl who mugs to the camera and doesn't make mistakes, and you never buy any sense of tension, right? I mean, Deus Ex Machina is a common thing that showed up in the old Star Wars, right? How are we going to get out of this one?
It's the Force.
Yeah, exactly. The force. Ben's going to come up and give you the force. That's how you win against all odds. Or there's a meteor field just when we need it, or whatever. Or the Sarlacc pit's just going to eat Boba Fett. Man, I just ruined the old Star Wars like mad. There's a lot of that in the old.
Rip in peace, by the way. Boba Fett died at 95 a few days ago.
Whoa, the original or
the original Boba Fett?
Are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. Oh man, that's tragic.
He lived long enough, hopefully, to see the new movie. We'll see. Anyway, continue, Dre.
Sorry, man, we've gotten way off track. And then one of the worst things, by the way, that George Lucas did when he remade the original movies, when he re-released them, is he cut out the voice, which whatever. He cut out Boba Fett's voice and used the prequel voice, which yeah. We did give you a spoiler warning, Xano51, who just said thanks for the spoilers, guys. But anyway, okay, I'm going to call that the show. Thanks for producer Brian, thanks for letting me rant about Star Wars. That's been in me for a couple weeks now, and it awakened on the show. I don't really have any. I should have some shout.
I've got plenty of shout outs, Dre.
All right, I'm going to give a shout out to the twitch.tv comments section. I haven't been. I usually don't have this open, and I'm glad I did. So, Glorious Hubris, Andrew Sutton, tell me if I'm saying it wrong, Xano51, and then, sorry, the font is just bad, but Subsoul, thank you so much for your comments. Legitimately, I could have just gotten derailed and just started reading them to myself and told Brian to talk. So, great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing, Andrew Sutton, and someone else we've got to have on the show soon, too, by the way. I don't know if Idris Elba would have been better for the Benedict Malo role. He's even more of a beefcake stud than Will Smith, but we'll see. He should definitely be James Bond, though. I think we can all agree on that. Stringer Bell himself. So, yeah, thanks, Twitch chat. That was good. I guess we'll go to my regular shout-outs. Draymond Green, of course, for his triple-double. And I do have to bring up one from Orange45 on the RNBA subreddit. Going back to the tanking topic a little bit, he has a great comic that he drew here with the 76ers. Yeah. So I won't spoil it all. Audio listeners, you'll just have to figure it out in the notes. But yeah, video listeners,
can you give the link on air just for anybody listening in their car, Brian?
Oh, the link on air. Just go to the RNBA subreddit. It's the top.
Look for Sixer Fists.
Yeah,
it's Sixer Fists on Reddit. It's amazing.
You'll find it. Yeah, so I think that's all I've got for shout-outs. Yeah, fun show tonight, Dre. Love the pop culture stuff.
All right, well, thanks so much for listening. This has been the Boxscore Geeks show. If you found us not through our site, you can find us on boxscoregeeks.com. We are on iTunes and Stitch. You can find us as the Boxscore Geeks show. Upvote, like, subscribe, all of that helps. We go live every week on twitch.tv/nerd numbers, usually Tuesday or Wednesday at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And apparently we get some people in the comments section on Twitch, the live thing, so we appreciate that. We'll make sure to tweet it out so you know when we're going live. And then we have recaps on YouTube, channel Nerd Numbers as well. Additionally, if you see any box scores that you like during the week, I do a weekly column called the Boxscore Geeks Top 10. Top 10 box scores of the week, hashtag BSG Top 10. If you tweet those at me, they may make the list. And with that, we will see you next week.